airplane on pavement. You have the luxury of rubber gripping the surface and brakes to assist you in turning and stopping. On the water, you're floating and subject to the flow of the current and the weather vaning tendencies we've previously discussed. You also have no brakes.
If the engine is running, you will likely be moving. The direction and strength of the wind and current, the thrust and torque effects of the airplane, and the deflection of the water rudders will determine where you are moving. There are three positions or attitudes in which a seaplane can be moved about on the water: the idling or displacement position, the plowing position, and the planing or on the step position. When taxiing with the engine idling or at a low RPM, the seaplane will remain in an attitude similar to being at rest on the water. The recommended taxi speed is usually below 6 knots so that the propeller will not pick up water spray and cause serious erosion of the propeller blades. In calm or light wind conditions, you need to hold the elevator control full back to raise the seaplane's nose and further reduce the possibility of water spray on the propeller. Since seaplanes have no brakes, it's especially important to taxi at a slow speed in congested or confined areas because inertia forces can build up rapidly. Another technique, known as blipping the engine, may be required when approaching a dock or ramp. This involves momentarily shutting off both magnetos while at idle and turning one back on before the propeller stops spinning. Blipping allows a greater reduction of idle power engine output. The idle taxi works well in light winds or when taxiing into the wind where weather vaning keeps you aligned with the wind. It is the least abusive method of taxi for the airplane. It starts to lose its effectiveness as the winds pick up speed and you want to go somewhere besides upwind. Turns on the water are dependent upon the conditions of the day and the desired direction of the turn. At an idle taxi, turns are performed using the water rudders, torque effects, and weather vaning tendency. Water rudders require the aircraft to be moving forward relative to the water and will turn the aircraft in the same direction as the air rudder. Power in the turn will also influence the radius of the turn. Additional power will tend to increase the radius of the turn, though in some aircraft, small bursts of power and torque can be utilized to quicken a turn to the left. Weather vaning will help the aircraft turn into the wind at an idle taxi. Turns to upwind have a much smaller turning radius than turns to downwind. When the power is increased significantly above idling, the seaplane will assume a nose-up or plowing position. You can use the plowing position for taxiing in rough water when it's desirable to raise the propeller clear of the spray or when turning the seaplane downwind during strong wind conditions. The plowing position is the most abusive on the aircraft. It causes the most erosion on the propeller due to water spray and provides little engine cooling for such a high power setting. The plowing position also raises the nose of the aircraft, causing it to obstruct your view in front of the aircraft. To attain this position, apply full power and hold the elevator control in the full aft position. After the plowing position is attained, reduce the power to maintain the proper speed. The plowing position raises the bow of the floats out of the water and shifts the center of buoyancy toward the stern of the floats. The change in the C of B places more aircraft surface in front of the pivot point and changes the weather vaning characteristics of the aircraft. With the center of buoyancy shifted far enough aft, the aircraft will now tend to weather vane to face downwind instead of upwind. This characteristic can be useful when you need to taxi downwind in strong wind conditions. Management of the center of buoyancy using the plow position can also be beneficial when taxiing in a crosswind that would otherwise weather vane the aircraft. The plow turn may be your best option for turning the nose of the airplane downwind in certain conditions. Maintain the elevator and power until the plow attitude is reached and the spray, where the float meets the water, has moved sufficiently aft to change the center of buoyancy. Reduce the power as appropriate to prevent the aircraft from coming up on the step and apply full rudder in the direction of the turn. This will allow the wind to pivot the airplane around the new C of B and point the nose downwind. Maintain the plow position for a couple of seconds while on the downwind heading, then briskly but smoothly pull the power back to the idle position. If the water conditions are favorable and there is a long distance to travel, you might be able to taxi at a higher speed, on the step. This position is reached by accelerating the seaplane through the plowing phase until the floats are literally riding on the water in a level position. You can best attain the planing or step position by holding the elevator control full aft and advancing the throttle to full power. As the seaplane accelerates, it will gradually assume a nose-high pitch attitude, raising the bow of the floats and causing the weight of the seaplane to be transferred toward the aft portion of the floats. When the seaplane attains its greatest pitch attitude, gradually relax the back pressure to cause the weight to be transferred from the aft portion of the floats onto the step area. As a result of aerodynamic and hydrodynamic lifting, the seaplane will be raised high in the water, allowing the floats to ride on top of the water. From either the plowing or step position, if power is reduced to idle, the seaplane will decelerate quite rapidly and eventually assume the idle position. You can use the step taxi for turns, but this is only recommended when turning from upwind to downwind. This maneuver utilizes the air rudder to turn the aircraft. When turning on the step, the inertia of the airplane creates an apparent centrifugal force to the outside of the turn. The wind counters this inertial force and keeps the airplane level on the water. Slow down, and the wind will roll the airplane toward the center of the turn. Tighten the radius, and the inertia will force the airplane roll into the wind.
Porpoising is a dynamic instability of the seaplane and may occur when the seaplane is moving across the water while on the step during high-speed taxi, takeoff, or landing. It occurs when the angle between the float and the water surface, also known as the trim angle, is outside the upper or lower design limit of the seaplane's proper pitch or trim angle. Improper use of the elevator, resulting in attaining too high or too low a pitch, sets off a cyclic oscillation which steadily increases in amplitude unless the proper pitch attitude is reestablished. Your seaplane will travel smoothly across the water while on the step, so long as the floats remain within a moderately tolerant range of trim angles. Porpoising will occur during a step taxi or takeoff run if the trim angle is not controlled with proper elevator pressure as the float comes on step. If porpoising does occur, stop it by applying timely back pressure on the elevator control to prevent the bow of the floats from digging into the water. The back pressure must be applied and maintained until porpoising is damped. If porpoising is not damped by the time the second oscillations occur, reduce the power to idle and hold the elevator control firmly back so the seaplane will settle onto the water with no further instability. You must learn and practice the correct trim angle for takeoff, planing, and landing for each type of seaplane. There should be no doubt as to the proper angles for the various maneuvers. The upper and lower trim angles are established by the design of the aircraft. However, changing the seaplane's gross weight, wing flap position, and center of gravity location will also change these limits. Skipping is a form of instability which may occur when landing with excessive speed at a nose-up trim angle. This nose-up attitude places the seaplane at the upper trim limit of stability and causes the seaplane to enter a cyclic oscillation when touching the water, resulting in the seaplane skipping across the surface. Skipping can also occur when crossing a boat wake while on the step. Do not confuse a skip with a porpoise. Your body feelings can quickly determine whether a skip or a porpoise has been encountered. A skip will exhibit vertical G-forces similar to bouncing a land plane. The porpoise is a rocking chair type forward and aft motion feeling. Correct for skipping by first increasing back pressure on the elevator control and adding sufficient power to prevent the floats from contacting the water. Then adjust the pressure on the elevator to attain the proper trim angle and reduce the power gradually to allow the seaplane to settle gently onto the water. Skipping will not continue increasing its oscillations as in porpoising because of the lack of forward thrust with reduced power.
When the wind is too strong to safely attempt a plow taxi, you may still have a couple of options. One option is to idle taxi upwind until reaching the glassy band of water near the shore. Upon reaching this sheltered area, plow taxi turn to a downwind heading. Another option would be to sail the seaplane downwind. This option may also be used when limited space makes it impractical to attempt a turn.
In light wind conditions, with the engine idling or shut down, your seaplane will naturally weather vane into the wind and then sail in the direction the tail is pointed. With a stronger wind and a slight amount of power, your seaplane will sail downwind toward the side in which the nose is pointed. Deflect your rudder and aileron to create drag on the appropriate side to move the nose and control the direction of movement. Lower the wing flaps and open the cabin doors to increase the air resistance and thus add to the effect of the wind. Lift your water rudders, since they have little or no effect in controlling direction while sailing. Before taxiing into a confined area, consider the effect of the wind and the current carefully. Otherwise, your seaplane may be carried into obstructions with resulting damage to the wings, tail surfaces, floats, or other parts of the seaplane. You can combine power on sailing with idle taxiing to place the seaplane in a predetermined spot with some accuracy. Idle taxi the aircraft into the wind at an angle that the wind will allow. Further reduce the power using the throttle, the addition of carburetor heat, and possibly switching to a single magneto. The airplane will now sail with the wind. Repetition of idle taxi and power on sailing maneuvers can allow